Well, thank you and welcome. Thank you to those of us who are joining us live during this webinar, and thank you for your interest if you're viewing this as a recording. I'm your host and your moderator, Tonny Colyn, President and co-founder for NACTR. This webinar is free, brought to you by NACTR today, and is graciously hosted by the Salvation Army Thrift Store. Thank you, Sarah, in the background, who's helping to put this all together for us today. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the Indigenous peoples of all the lands that we are on today. While we do meet today virtually on this platform, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the importance of the lands which each of us call home. We do this to reaffirm our commitment and responsibility in improving relationships between nations and to improving our own understanding of local Indigenous peoples and their cultures. From coast to coast to coast, we acknowledge the ancestral and unceded territory of all the Inuit, Métis, and First Nation peoples that call this land home. Today's webinar will give us a glimpse into what's been happening in the textile diversion and recycling world in 2023, and we're looking forward to a very exciting 2024. I would like to preface by saying that this slide deck is loaded with a lot of information, so we are going to be making it available to you afterwards as an Adobe or a PDF file, as well as the recording will be available for your future use, because we trust that you'll see lots of nuggets in here that you'll want to remember later. There will be time for a Q&A at the end, so we encourage you to drop your questions into the Q&A. You'll see it at the top or side of your screen. And with that Q&A, we love questions about any of the work that we're doing. I'm sure we're all excited to be sharing this with you today. All right, so let's get into it. Today, our guest speakers. Thank you so much to some friends and colleagues here that they've been able to join us today. I'll start off by introducing Catherine Kerr. She is the head of the Circular Economy Unit in the Waste Reduction and Management Division. Catherine has worked with the federal government for 24 years at Natural Resources Canada, Innovation Science and Economic Development, and Defence Research and Development Canada, focused on policy and program development and implementation related to innovation and market developments in renewable energy, forest products, clean tech, and defense sectors. Well, I couldn't remember all this. It's a good thing I wrote it down, eh? Catherine holds an honors in BS in environmental science from Brock and a Master of Public Administration from Carleton. So welcome, Catherine. We also have joining us, we have Eric, and Eric has over 15 years of experience with Environment and Climate Change Canada. He is currently a manager in the Plastics and Marine Litter Division since 2019, where he manages a team of 4 to 5 that develop sector-based solutions. His team is focused on research and assessing sectors to advance the project of zero plastic waste in Canada. It's really neat how we've often talked in the last year or two about there's so much plastics in textiles, and that's where the tie-in comes in, and why ECC is also very interested in much of the work that we're doing. Previously, Eric worked on high profiles, chemicals, and under the chemical management plan, including to the risk management of, oh, I don't even know what these are, bisphenol, BPAs, yep, those, where he developed a pollution prevention planning notice and environmental performance agreement. He's also worked on legacy substances such as land, where he developed regulations to prohibit and manufacture and import of lead wheel weights. Eric has also spent a year as a clean tech researcher and lead evaluator for the Canadian Plastics Innovation Challenge. We've got some really great people here with a lot of experience in different sectors. That's well evident. And swinging away a little bit from government, I'm going to switch over to introduce you to Kelly Drennan. Many may know of you. Many of you may know of her. Kelly Drennan has founded Fashion Takes Action in 2007 with a mission to drive sustainability and systemic change. As a devoted systems thinker, she aims to break down barriers to sustainability throughout the entire fashion lifestyle. Leading initiatives like the Ontario Textile Diversion Collaborative since 2017, Kelly has championed circular fashion for engaging diverse stakeholders in textile diversion, reuse, and recycling. Her notable achievements include co-authoring Canada's Textile Recycling Feasibility Report and spearheading a national mechanical recycling pilot. She now leads the Canadian Circular Textiles Consortium, the CCTC, in an effort to enable circular systems in Canada. We're going to hear more about that as she speaks with us today, sharing that. As a prominent figure in sustainable fashion, Kelly established the annual World World Ethical Apparel Roundtable, which was the WEAR conference in 2014 and many years since, fostering collaboration among industry experts. I gotta say, if anybody can pull people together from across an industry, it's Kelly and her team. They are just amazing. So as an advocate for education, she developed the Sustainable Fashion Toolkit in 2019 and oversees Fashion Takes Action's youth education program, My Clothes, My World, impacting over 30,000 students across Canada. Recognized for her outstanding contributions, Kelly received the Clean 50 Award in 2017 for education and thought leadership and the Sustainability Award from the Canadian Arts and Fashions Awards in 2022. So very pleased to have all three of you with us. Thank you very much for agreeing to come and chat a little bit about your areas of expertise and what's been happening in textiles. Let's see here. So I just wanted to tell the group and all of our listeners today a little bit about the NACTR organization. So as an organization, our focus in NACTR is on supporting our members and increasing their donations, whereby our members can continue to grow their social impact in communities across Canada. Donating clothing and household goods to charities not only supports social enterprise and local communities, but it also impacts the environment through the life extension of goods. And this is being recognized more than ever before, giving goods the best chance at a second life right here in Canada. Charities play a crucial role in supporting and addressing social, economic, and environmental issues, filling the gaps in public services, supporting vulnerable populations, providing clothing, system supports, disaster relief, emergency response, and a host of other social services, as you can see with the brands and the logos on your screen here. Charities in Canada complement government efforts and bring essential resources, expertise, and passion to address social challenges and improve the well-being of all Canadians. Their presence and activity contributes significantly to building a compassionate, inclusive, and thriving nation. So that's just a little bit about us at NACTR. So I wanted to chat a little bit about what the past year has been like before we start dipping into what the future in 2024 holds. And it has been a very, very busy year for, I'm sure, many people post-COVID. Everyone seems to be back at the grind of things and working hard. We were able to do some really neat projects in NACTR. We were published 2 papers in the beginning of the year. They were the Reduce, Reuse, Rewear parts 1 and 2. And that was really important because they really started to quantify what was being diverted from landfills into the hands of charities, and also what the social and economic impact, the potential of what more can be done across the industry, and a lot of collaboration certainly was involved with that. We were presenting at several waste conferences and hosted a number of webinars that you may have been a part of. Those are available, the webinars, past webinars, at nactr.ca underneath our webinars section. Feel free to check that out. We provided our internal members with a textile diversion landscape review, which was really impactful because it was speaking about competition in our places and what we're doing to change our business models and becoming more agile in the modern age. We grew our national donation site locator. We did the textile strategy workshop with ECCC, and we also launched a few studies that we're looking to complete in this year. And one of the other areas we've been working on is expanding our resources for municipalities. And I think that those are things that are really going to see a big jump for us coming in 2024. Lots of activity for an organization that's run by volunteers, certainly. So when we're thinking about what's been happening over the last year, I think it's important to talk about what our government engagement has been looking like. And at a federal level, there's been lots of discussions around policy and regulations, trade and import and export considerations, research and development funding. And we're going to hear a little bit more about how ECCC has leaned into these areas and helped us in those ways. The provincial level, there's always been a lot of discussion in different provinces, particularly in BC and Nova Scotia. We've seen more of that. There's talk around waste management regulations. Of course, EPR is always something that is in the back of everybody's mind and is talked about a little bit for textiles. There's been funding for different programs and also lead into education and outreach. So there seems to be a real appetite to educate the public to take some of this onus of themselves to stop all these textiles from going into landfill and to redirect them to where they can be reused. I'm not going to go into these details. As I mentioned previously, this slide deck will be available so that you can take a look at it yourself, but I would be remiss if I didn't mention the municipal engagement. And there's been a growth in the past year, and I think this is where we're going to see a lot more uptake coming in 2024, with especially Ontario and the whole blue box system change. Once that's gotten settled in, there's certainly a lot of appetite for looking at other streams, textiles being one of them, and how municipalities can be more engaged. From everything from looking at waste audits, public engagement, to licensing and permits, and especially monitoring and reporting, it's great to see a lot more activity in this space and us to be able to support municipalities to help them divert more of those textiles so that we can use them for good. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Catherine. And Catherine, if you just want to suggest next, and I'll move the slides forward with you. And Catherine's going to talk a little bit about the important work that they've been doing. So Catherine.
Thanks very much, Tonny. I'll wait for the slide to get pulled up there. Is the slide up? I just didn't see the slide change to my first slide of the deck.
Yeah, it's at objectives and approach.
Oh, okay. I don't see that view, but that's okay. I'm just going to dive in. So on September 25th, ECCC hosted a multi-stakeholder in-person workshop in Ottawa. We wanted to talk about the opportunities for circularity of textiles with a focus on residential textiles and increasing diversion through municipal collection programs and through the work of charities, and better understand what kind of federal roles might be most useful in expanding this activity. So several municipalities participated in the session, including Montreal, Gatineau, Ottawa, Toronto, Markham, Metro Vancouver, and Calgary, and federal departments. We had people from National Research Council, ECCC, Innovation, Science, and Economic Development, along with charities, including Goodwill, Salvation Army, and Renaissance Quebec, as well as national and regional organizations. So NACTR was part of the mix, with Tonny represented, and Circular Economy Leadership Canada, Fashion Takes Action, of course, with Kelly, Circular Innovation Council, Federation of Canadian Municipalities, Canadian Standards Association, Recycling Council of Alberta, Innovation Guelph, and the Circular Opportunity Innovation Launchpad. So it was a really good mix of folks and people who have good perspective based on a lot of activity that's been happening already. And through the workshop, we explored opportunities to where there is already existing and potential new efforts for collection, triaging, and the processing of textiles in Canada. We wanted to look in particular at the challenges and opportunities associated with this ecosystem, and also where the federal government could lead or support in that transition. We held several calls over the course of the summer to get ready for the workshop. We wanted to talk to all of the attendees and get their take on recent efforts, activities that they'd already completed, ones that were recently underway or planned. So we'd have a good sense of the status of efforts and examples that could be featured as good practices during the workshop. But also, in addition to refining the agenda for the workshop, it gave us all a collective starting point for the conversation, really, so that we would know where the greatest priorities were and where we might focus on next. Next slide. So the workshop consisted of opening remarks from our Director General and an opening presentation from myself to acknowledge what led us here. And namely, that was a lot of research that's been done over the last few years by various organizations. There have been projects supported by ECCC, conducted by various consulting firms, and also administered through NACTR and Fashion Takes Action, and also media attention that's been given in the last few years to the increasing volumes of textiles that are going to domestic landfills, but also the exports, the volumes that are being exported. So the rest of the day consisted of 3 panels and breakout discussions. In the first panel, we explored different national efforts to address textile circularity more broadly through CCTC and the new consortium that Kelly has gotten off the ground. And we also looked at other topics and what kind of lessons we could learn from them in terms of the Canada Plastics Pact and perspectives from CELC, and how those national approaches could help us look at these issues and also figure out how to address them in a coordinated, strategic way. In the second panel, we had 3 municipalities share their experiences, putting in place different measures, and also developing strategies and plans to increase diversion of textiles away from landfill. So these efforts included things like instituting municipal collection programs with charities, either through bins or through periodic collection, for instance, in quarterly collection drives. We also heard of other municipal efforts like banning textiles at curbside and using clear plastic bags for the enforcement of that for household waste collection, as well as clinics to repair textiles. So there was a lot of good work that was already going underway with municipalities, and more examples to share and possibly replicate. In the third panel, we heard from charities about their existing considerable efforts. As many of you know, with NACTR and all the different organizations involved, there's so much diversion that's already happening. So we wanted to acknowledge that work and what kinds of plans and expansion were also underway there. We also heard from COIL, the Circular Opportunity Innovation Launchpad, and they talked about the need to understand the circularity of systems by looking closely at the sources of supply and also the sources of demand, and how to smooth those connections and gradually expand the flows through those systems. Next slide. So we talked about a variety of possible federal roles. I think largely when people think about the federal government and possible contributions, they think about money and they think about regulation. But there are a lot of different ways that the federal government can get involved in this and other issues. So we did a walkthrough of some of the ongoing initiatives that we have done to support this area, and that included work on processing techniques, like new exploring and developing new industrial processes that could enable additional market pathways for textiles. And the goal there would be to reduce the volumes that are landfilled or exported. We also fund research studies, which Eric will be speaking a little bit more about in terms of some of the efforts that we've supported to address information gaps, to improve our collective understanding and awareness of the textile waste streams themselves, and the processes and the barriers and opportunities for collection, triaging, and processing and recycling those wastes or those materials. And convening stakeholders. As we did with the workshop in the fall, there are opportunities for the federal government to convene people, whether it's through workshops or working groups, participation on various tables, including CCTC, and considering possible federal roles all the while and receiving integrated input from people from various perspectives about what a federal role could look like or what kinds of federal roles might be most useful to inform policy direction. Next slide. So finally, in terms of some of the key takeaways, we already know that there are so many textiles that are already being manufactured and sold globally, and that this trend, combined with the overconsumption trends that we've seen, especially in Canada, are what's really driving demand and also creating existing challenges that are continuing to grow and that really need to be addressed. Some of the drivers for action that we saw and that we've talked about with the different players involved included reducing domestic landfill volumes and exports, something that our division in particular, Waste Reduction Management Division, is preoccupied with. Reducing operating costs for municipalities. We saw how those municipalities that have put in place collection programs have been able to reduce their own operating costs for the collection of residential household waste. And expanded volumes received and sold by charities. So the existing involvement of charities, but also the increasing involvement of charities in municipal collection efforts just creates another stream for the charities to be able to receive and resell those apparel textiles, and then continue the good work that's already being done. So we looked at, in terms of the existing efforts, we looked at the municipal collection efforts, the bins, centralized collection, as well as measures like donation locator maps, helping people connect with where their local spots are for making donations so that they have an easier time of accessing them. And the importance of communication. Municipalities and charities, as they both embark on new efforts here, it's so important for them to be in good, strong communication with each other to understand the impacts on their respective systems by increasing the volumes that are being received, and also the importance of public campaigns, good marketing messages for people about what is and isn't accepted, and what's being done with them and how they can help to contribute good value products, but also products that can maybe be damaged, but still received and still processed in a good way. So I think that kind of brings to a conclusion the main points that I wanted to flag from the workshop. In terms of our own next steps, we'll be finalizing the report in the next few weeks and getting that out to folks. We will also be going on to support the existing industrial process work that's happening with the National Research Council and supporting those projects. And we'll have internal discussions and conversations going into our budget planning and our work planning for next year to determine what role we're going to have relative to Eric's group. And he'll be speaking next about some broader roadmap work that he's going to be completing. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to you, Eric.
Thank you very much. So thank you, Catherine, and thank you, Tonny, for the introduction. So as Tonny was saying at the beginning, I'm one of the managers in the Plastic-Free and Litter Division. So my team is responsible for developing our sector-based solutions. So that includes developing our objectives for each of the sectors and developing kind of our roadmap for achieving our zero plastic waste in each of those sectors. So textiles and apparels is one of those key sectors that contribute a lot to our plastics waste agenda. So it's definitely one of our priority sectors. So for the last several years, we've been supporting a number of projects in the sector, and some of those I think have been touched upon earlier. We've supported NACTR, we've supported FTA. So we've expanded our knowledge on the microfiber pollution through work done by Oceanwise and Simon Fraser University. This project looked at a lot of different things in the microfiber sector, including how much is actually being released through the washing machine process. We also supported FTA, who did their feasibility study on textile recycling in Canada, and they also done the proof of concept and the pilot project for mechanical textile recycling. So we're hoping that this will pave the way for more domestic textile and apparel recycling activities in Canada. We've also commissioned ChemInfo Service to do a waste characterization study that looked at both reuse, recycling, and the disposal of textiles in Canada. And this, again, is helping us to understand kind of the nuances in the sector. And we also supported NACTR, who did a study on the benefits of reuse in Canada. Currently, we're supporting a number of projects as well. So we're supporting Kelly through the CCTC. So we're hoping that that's just recently launched. I'll let her talk to that. We're also supporting NACTR in their work on the digital tax receipt system and reuse programs run by neighborhood associations. We're also supporting Ocean Diagnostics and the Raincoat Conservation Foundation, who are developing kind of a comprehensive report on microfiber pollution. And this is an expansion of some work done in the US by the US EPA, and we're going to kind of put it in a Canadian context. So taking the US report on how they looked at microfibers and kind of see if there's a different aspect to look at it through the Canadian context. And lastly, we're supporting the CTIA, the Canadian Textile Industry Association. We're doing an overview of all the sustainability and recycling programs in Canada, EU, and the US. And this is kind of just to understand how we can kind of lessons learned from how other countries are doing it. Are there areas that we can improve upon? Are there areas that we can maybe look at to take action? And so hopefully we'll be able to get some good information from that. Most of these projects aim to be completed by March 31st, but some of these have multi-year components to it. So for those that are interested, all the reports for the old projects are available either online through various organizations, and if you have trouble finding those, I'm happy to help out. And some of those are also available upon demand. So the ChemInfo study, we can probably provide a copy of that if there's interest in it. Next slide, please. So this all comes down to what is our mandate. So our mandate is to support innovation market transformations by implementing measures or providing support to reduce plastic waste and pollution in targeted sectors. So textiles is just one of those first sectors that we're really trying to take action in. So the objective is to reduce plastic waste and pollution while also limiting the microfiber shedding in Canada from various sectors in order to achieve our zero plastic waste objectives. So our goal is to develop a roadmap, which I'll talk about a little bit shortly. And the roadmap is going to lay out the foundation, hopefully, for what we're trying to accomplish to date. The government would manage and develop the implementation of the roadmap, But we're hoping that there's going to be some elements that will be for everyone in the entire sector to look at. So we're hoping there will be some, you'll find yourselves in some of this. So we're hoping the industry will take on some leadership role. We're hoping there will be some roles for municipal governments and provincial governments, and it'll definitely be a role for the federal government to take action. We're hoping to work with all parties involved and to really assess where the best place is to take that solution. Is it better to take the action at the end of life, or to take the action more to design of the textiles at the beginning of the process? Next slide, please. So proposed elements of a roadmap. As you'll notice when you'll be able to see the roadmap or our pre-consultation as that rolls out, we've identified numerous issues that we understand in the textile sector. Some of these are just understanding how much textile and microfibers are actually present in the environment, or how much is actually going to landfills. So the first step is really quantifying the textile and apparel waste and the pollution. Some of the solutions we have, well, we're doing lots of research in that to kind of get that information, but we're also hoping that the Federal Plastic Registry, which was recently announced on December 23rd, will be able to help gather some of that information. The next issue we have is, can we extend the life of some of these textile and apparel products? So is that either through increased durability, reuse, repair? Some of the solutions could include developing guidelines or requirements, maybe some standards for ensuring these products remain in the circular economy. The next is, can we actually manage the waste at the end of life? We know there's a number of take-back programs that already exist. There's been a lot of discussions with a few provinces that are looking at developing extended producer responsibility systems. So we're hopefully going to be able to capitalize on some of this action already be taken at a provincial level, and maybe see if there's something that could be done, to either encourage that to be done by all provinces, or if there's some sort of way to promote or develop guidelines or develop recommendations for all the provinces through the national perspective. And lastly, we're going to be looking at, we're also going to be looking at textile recycling. So as I think Kelly will probably mention a little bit later on, there's not a lot of textile recycling happening in Canada. So we do know there is potential there, but there's going to be a lot of work that needs to be done to just develop the infrastructure. How will that look like? Is it just a question of funding? Is there already some pilots that are, available to, be developed? Is there some industry that are already looking to support some of this recycling infrastructure? So I think we're all looking at that, and if there is some areas that you think you can kind of support that, I think my team would definitely be happy to sit down with you and kind of explore what the recycling needs are. And lastly, we're going to look at microfiber shedding. So part of my team is looking at how much microfibers are actually ending up in the environment, and what actions we can do to actually reduce the microfiber shedding. That could either be done through the early action in designs for the actual textile products, or by requiring some sort of management at end of life, either through installing filters on washing machines, or working with our municipal wastewater treatment plants to develop systems that can actually capture the microfibers. Next slide, please. So the next step is for us to publish our pre-consultation documents in the next couple weeks. So that will be up and running. There'll be a 30-day comment period. We're hopefully going to have a few webinars and have stakeholders to be able to provide comments on kind of our issues we've identified, the potential areas where we hope to be able to explore. And then the objective would be to publish a draft roadmap in early spring to late spring. Again, that would have a 60-day comment period. And then we'd probably be publishing our roadmap in late 2024. And with that, I think I'll pass it on to Kelly for the industry engagement aspects.
Thank you for that, Eric. Just before we move on to Kelly, lots of information there from both Eric and Catherine. So if you've got questions, don't forget to pop them into the Q&A. And with that, we'll take a look at how the industry's become involved, and that has been centered around a lot of work with Fashion Takes Action. So over to you, Kelly.
Great, thank you so much. Thanks for inviting me to be here. I see a lot of familiar names in the audience, and some of you actually are currently working with us, so that's great. Just a quick background. I know it's been mentioned a couple of times, but for those of you who may not be familiar with Fashion Takes Action, we've been doing this work and making fashion circular for about 8 years now. Really started at the WEAR conference, which Tonny had mentioned. Some of you were there. We had Joanne from the Recycling Council of Ontario, now Circular Innovation Council, led some labs with various stakeholders from across the value chain. And it was really the first time everybody came together to share all of their different perspectives, which made us realize that we needed to have some sort of convening body to bring everybody together. So we ran the OTDC, the Ontario Textile Diversion Collaborative, which was just that for about 3 years. It was a provincially funded program, which is why we were focused on the Ontario region only, but we were connected with folks in the work that was being done out west and out east and in Quebec as well. And then from there, we basically grew into more of a national focus thanks to the support of ECCC. We did conduct Canada's Textile Recycling Feasibility Study, which you can see here. There's an image in the middle, and that is actually a report that you can download for free on our website. It's quite meaty. Yeah, but if you're really into this topic, then you probably would be interested in reading it. And then we also, from that, conducted a mechanical recycling pilot. So we pulled together, basically created a recycling supply chain all within Canada. We also pulled together a national stakeholder learning group to bring everybody sort of through that pilot at each phase to learn at a deeper level. And then we've published a guidance document, which is also available on our website now. Okay, next slide. So before we kind of dive in, I don't want to make any assumptions. I know there's been a lot of talk so far, but I just want to sort of put it in context in terms of maybe, why we're doing this work. Globally, there's around 92 million tons of post-consumer textiles that are being put into the landfill or incinerated every single year. And that number is only expected to increase as overconsumption and overproduction of fast fashion goods continues to trend upwards. What does that mean for Canada? Well, from the study that we've done, Canadians produce about 500,000 tons of post-consumer textile waste every single year. And we know that more than 85% of discarded PCT or post-consumer textiles end up in our local or in foreign landfills. Canada is also one of the largest exporters of post-consumer textiles to countries like Ghana. We know also from NACTR that estimated that the circular textile market is valued at $7 billion. And we know that there's an appetite for reuse, waste diversion, and recycling efforts in Canada. But prior to the formation of the CCTC, Canada really lacked a convening body for all of the industry players to come together to track and connect and collaborate on projects. So instead of working in silos, we basically called for collective action and recognized that our role in this system is that convening body that can connect the stakeholder groups together and help accelerate efforts towards circularity in Canada and globally. So with federal funding from ECCC, we formed the Canadian Circular Textiles Consortium. And this ecosystem of stakeholders really is comprised of industry partners, so brands, sorters, nonprofits, academia, as well as government bodies from all levels. We have municipal, provincial, and federal. We also have local and global peer organizations, private and external partners, and to some degree we'll engage with the general public. Okay, I think the next slide. So this is an overview of who our partners are currently. Each organization that joins can have up to 5 staff participate across the working groups, which means that we've got about 100 stakeholders currently involved, which is pretty massive. Most of those are Canadians. We have a handful you'll see in our knowledge partners that are global. We do lean on a couple of other organizations who have expertise in these areas that they can bring to us in more of an advisory capacity. Next slide. So this is a lot on the slide, I realize, but essentially, we are coming together to foster collective action through sharing key learnings and resources and research to really expedite circular initiatives in Canada and to reduce the duplication of industry efforts. We were starting to see a lot of that happening and that overlap, and quite frankly, you know, we don't have the time to be doing that, and we don't have the resources, whether that's money or the human resources involved. So having the CCTC to come together really and share all of this information is quite key. This is my last slide, and I'm just going to quickly touch on the 4 working groups, or our approaches to achieving our vision. We have policy and legislation, and it's clear that EPR and labeling are 2 subgroups that have formed now within that working group. So we will have sort of these little task force committees now addressing both of those issues. Within the education working group, it's been identified that youth, Gen Z and millennials are of main focus, with a secondary focus on industry. In the landscape research and data analysis working group, that group is really about filling in the data gaps. Now, it's great to hear of all the different projects that are happening, but there still are a lot of gaps. So that's also about mapping and understanding like what research has been done, both in Canada and globally, and who are the different players, both in Canada and globally, that we need to engage. And then also doing an impact analysis on, say, things like advanced recycling technologies. And then the final working group is pilots. So continuing to do like the mechanical recycling pilot we did with Canadian Tire to make that laundry hamper. We want to continue doing this with end-of-life pathways, but also looking at circular business models and piloting reuse, repair, and rental, and working with retailers in that capacity as well. So that's it. And if anyone is interested in joining, you can join the CCTC at any time. So feel free to shoot me an email, kelly@fashiontakesaction.com. Thank you.
Sorry, I was muted there. Thank you, Kelly, for that. Just a reminder, if there's any questions, to pop them into the Q&A, and we will see them and flag them to be talking about them. So yeah, you know, we've taken a lot of different perspectives there, from the federal roles and engagement, the federal roadmap, work in the CCTC, all the NACTR initiatives, and what does that mean for 2024? I think that the momentum that we really gathered in 2023 is enormous. And I think we're just kind of all realizing that once we started putting all this work together, and this is just the work that we've touched on. There's been many other partners and many other groups that have been working on pilots and recycling, expanding their diversion and getting more bins or collection points or whatever that might look out. There's been public campaigns talked about, making sure that messaging out to people and residents encourages them to donate and not to dump. So lots of activity right across the country. I know that we've seen a growth. I also work for the Salvation Army. We've definitely seen a growth in donations, but also a great need for donations with the harder economic climate that we've had. It's, you know, we need these donations to be able to support the social services, but they're being taxed more than ever before. So that is a strong message that we want to make sure that people know to donate their goods. So I see a couple of questions here. I'm just going to pop in for our group here and maybe continue this dialogue. One question here: how far away from an EPR program for textiles are we? Okay, I planted that one in there because I'm sure some people are thinking, and it's interesting that an EPR program seems to be a silver magic bullet in terms of recycling, but this is a very complex issue. Does anybody want to pick this up first and start with that conversation?
I don't mind just starting it off. I think one thing that we have to keep in mind with EPR is that most EPR systems are provincially regulated and are provincially managed. So we won't have a federal EPR system for textile anytime soon. One thing we have to do is make sure, well, 2 things. One, we have to make sure there actually is the infrastructure to collect the products to begin with. But next, we have to make sure there actually is an end-of-life role for those products. If we're looking at other EPR systems that exist internationally, and I'm looking to France as one of those examples, a lot of the products that are being collected are actually being exported to developing countries. I don't think that's quite the solution that we're aiming to have in Canada. We're hoping to keep these textiles in Canada to continue the circular economy. I don't think it'll be tomorrow, but I think it's a lawful objective that we still need to plan towards.
I'd love to jump in here too. I mean, it's been kind of a passion project of mine for the last 4 years. And, to just jump off of what Eric said, it's not going to happen overnight. It could be 5 years, maybe even longer before we see something like that, if I was to put a timeline on it. I think right now there's a lot of work that has to be done. I think not only here in Canada in terms of the infrastructure, what are we going to do with it once we've managed to actually divert it? We don't want to be shipping it to the global south. I mean, only what they really want. I'm not saying that we need to impose a ban on exports, but definitely we're sending too much stuff. Also just sort of looking at elements that are going to, like, it's such a big thing, right? What I think is good is one of the things that's good about Canada being slower to EPR for textiles as compared to France, the EU, and now California, is that we can kind of take a look at and poke holes in existing EPR schemes for textiles, and then maybe I like to say, like, maybe like Canada can get it right. I don't think any existing EPR scheme for textiles is perfect. So maybe that's sort of the positive side of things, right? Is that we can kind of figure out, where is it, and the idea of this whole, what you said with France and it's being exported to the global south. Of course, we don't want to be doing that. So there's a lot of other lessons I think we could be learning from other EPR schemes along the way.
Yeah, well said, Kelly. And I think that, there was talk about information gaps and things that we don't know, and there's a lot that we can learn. And one of the areas that we can start on is building towards an EPR system is getting the baseline data, like what's going into the landfills, what's being produced, and how are we measuring that, what's being diverted, what's happening to the stuff that is being diverted, all of those conversations. And it seems that there's a lot of work in that space now, so that hopefully is laying strong foundational groundwork for that future.
And I think it's also important just from a brand perspective, the industry there's going to be a lot of pushback. Obviously, paying per garment is something that brands are just going to have to face, but it's not something that they can just do overnight either. A lot of brands don't even know how many garments they're producing. And so there's so much work that has to come into, mapping their understanding, the volumes that they're producing. And hopefully EPR will have an impact on that in terms of producing less because there's an overproduction problem, and then also incentivizing brands to design better, to design more durable and design circular and more sustainable. So those are some of the other sort of benefits. It's not just about developing infrastructure and paying for recycling. It's sort of the whole picture. It's the products are being designed better to begin with. So that's the part that most excites me, actually.
Thanks for that. We've got another question up here. It's kind of an interesting question. What is the near future next steps for diversion? And yeah, I guess all of us might have different answers on that. Does anybody, Catherine, do you want to maybe have a comment on that?
Sure. I noticed that there was quite a lot of buzz at the coffee breaks and at lunch breaks when it came to the workshop that we hosted in the fall. And was really pleased to see all that activity. There are a lot of different people that are looking to make this part of their plans, whether it's municipalities or other organizations and charities involved. So I think there are a lot of interesting new diversion activities that are going to be started up as a result of that. And then, as some of the other panelists have mentioned, it's one thing to collect all this stuff, but there's no point collecting it if you don't have a next step in mind for it. So we don't want to have a ton of it collected and then further increase the volumes that are exported that are maybe not the kind of materials or too much in terms of volume that's being exported. So coming up with new and novel domestic approaches to be able to keep these textiles going and circulating in the economy, as Eric mentioned, that's definitely a priority. And so we will for sure be continuing to support those NRC projects to identify some novel ways of processing domestically, but diversion is certainly going to be part of that.
Yeah. Eric, did you have a comment on that?
I think if we go down diversion and we include recycling and how does that look like, I think Kelly has been able to prove that mechanical recycling is feasible in Canada. The question, though, is can we do that at mass scale? And can we get the distances from, I guess, the urban centers to be able to bring that textile product to the actual, use that feedstock to bring it into the actual recycling facilities? Does it make economic sense? I think that we're still working that out and making sure that it's doable. But I think it's not going to be a quick solution. So as Kelly alluded to as well, I think we still have to look at advanced recycling and how that will play a role into this. There's lots of textiles that may not be even feasible into recycling period, right? We have to remove the buttons, we have to remove the zippers. It's a whole very time consuming process. So a lot of these need to be figured out prior to even developing the infrastructure. Do we need to have better criteria for design? Canada's not a very big manufacturing country. We import most of these textiles, so that's another major factor in end of life management. Are we imposing requirements on other countries that are developing these products that are importing them into Canada, and what mechanism are we going to use in order to restrict that or control that in some way? So I think supply chain transparency is another big important concept as well.
Yeah, no, I hear what you're saying. I think from my perspective and for NACTR members, there's still so much stuff that's going into landfill that has recapturable value and that we can do life extension with. So I wouldn't want to say that we have to wait till there's better end of life solutions, because certainly throwing anything into landfill today that could be reused is a shame. And our numbers show 76% of post-consumer textile waste goes into landfill. And we think most of that can actually be reused or go through the process of life extension, at least in Canada. And yeah, maybe those abroad issues are other things that we have to look at. I had another interesting question here, which kind of ties in. Yes, sorry.
I just wanted to respond to the diversion question. In terms of next steps, I really think, and this hasn't really been mentioned today, educating the general public, I think, is a huge factor in this. I think and not only educating them, but making it easy and accessible. We're creatures of convenience. So, coming up, and those of us who are in urban centers, it's a lot easier to donate to the Salvation Army or to Goodwill, et cetera. But those who live in rural areas, we need to come up with some solutions for them, because if it's an hour drive for them to donate their textiles, that's something they're not going to do. They're likely going to just toss them into the garbage. So I think educating the public should be really a main focus moving forward in terms of increasing diversion rates.
Absolutely, for sure. Very strong point. Another question that we have here, which kind of ties into the recycling. Are you aware of any innovative reuse for end-of-life textiles, such as construction materials in Canada? So maybe looking not necessarily at the textile to textile, but what else could we use this product for? I think, Catherine, you flicked your hand up there. You want to speak to that?
For sure. And I was realizing through these conversations, these points on the panel, that I probably could have been more precise about the nature of those National Research Council projects. While there is other good work going on, and the work that Eric flagged that's been undertaken by Fashion Takes Action on mechanical recycling pilots, what we're focused on with the National Research Council is processes through which the textiles could be converted into other materials that would be used as production inputs to other sectors. So whether that's automotive in some applications or other sectors, manufacturing inputs is really where we're going in terms of how we can keep those materials in the economy.
Yeah, and I just want to add with the CCTC, even though Fashion Takes Action generally works with the apparel industry, the CCTC isn't necessarily about that. That work is all textiles and looking for solutions that are upcycled, downcycled, recycled. In fact, we have a project right now that we're looking at doing another recycling pilot. One is to definitely create a yarn so that we can actually mechanically recycle and make a fabric, but also looking at other solutions in other sectors. So sort of just jumping off of what Catherine was talking about. I think that there's a lot of potential there. I'm kind of the black sheep in the fashion industry, globally speaking, in terms of this, because especially brands are really textile driven. If the average garment's only worn 7 times, do we really want to go through all of that work to make a garment that's going to just be worn 7 times? Or do we want to look at other products and markets where they're going to have maybe a 10 or 20 year lifespan? So just something to think about.
Behavioral change comes to mind as well, that's something that, we have to get consumers to shift their activities and their behaviors to make large differences, or we have to, force them by having things that last longer and in that regard. I've got another, this is a really interesting question. I want to address this first to Kelly. With brands being more involved with the end of life of their products because of EPR legislation, potentially there will be less donations to organizations like Salvation Army. What do the experts think of this, and can legislation help with this?
Well, I think what if I can read this properly, I think a lot of people, and I know Eric had mentioned it earlier in one of the slides, you know, if take back programs, if that's sort of EPR in the form of a take back program, that's one thing. I don't necessarily think that that's the direction the industry is going to head. And so at this point, I am not overly concerned that it's going to have an impact. I think in tandem, if we are making sure that consumers are being educated, that they're donating their clothes, you know, and giving them the opportunity to donate it to a charity, if we can make it as convenient as possible, you know, even more convenient than having to take it to the mall, I don't think it's going to be a huge issue. Right now, in-store take-back programs are being heavily criticized. There was a research project done where H&M had, you know, their clothes that they were collecting were tagged, like RFID tagged, and then found washing up on the shores in, you know, countries in Africa. So, you know, brands are recognizing that a take-back program without a proper solution in place for that material isn't necessarily a good thing. So just, it's an area to watch for sure, but I think EPR is going to, from a brand side, drive better design and more durable design. Sure, that might end up having an impact on donations, but you know, right now donations are, you know, thrift stores are being flooded with ultra fast fashion, Shein, and you know, other brands that are just really crappy that, you know, consumers can buy them brand new for $3.99. So what is a thrift retailer selling them for? So if we move away from this poor quality, crappy clothing and get back to quality, durable products, I think it's only going to benefit everybody.
Certainly. We've done some take back programs with Salvation Army and some brands, and that seems to be a great way to do a take back, is when a brand can actually partner with a charity so that they can get the best benefit. But I'm not concerned in the very least when I see how full everyone's closets are and how much product is being produced and how much is still going in landfill. Even if many of the brands jumped on board, there's lots of room for more thrift and more donations to charities. So not a concern today, but definitely something to watch on for in the future. I'm just going to close off there and see if there's any final comments. Perhaps Eric, Kathy, Kelly, if there's something that you wanted to share before we sign off today.
I just want to thank everyone for taking the time to come out. I think Tony, thank you very much for organizing this. I think it's very helpful to get everyone in the room and have these conversations going, and to just look out for the roadmap and the pre-consultation when that's launched shortly.
Yeah, I'll echo Eric's points in thanking NACTR for hosting the session and inviting us to participate. It was really encouraging through the conversations that took place this summer, preparing for the workshop, to see the level of activity and the level of involvement on the part of everyone. All of those different organizations that I mentioned have interest in this area, have activities in this area, and are considering additional plans. So that level of momentum was really good to see, and creates a lot of momentum for 2024 for sure.
Yeah, and I just, echoing both what Catherine and Eric have said, thank you to NACTR and to Tonny for having me here today. And also just, having been in this space now for 7 years, I'm very optimistic. I think there is momentum. If I look at the number of stakeholders who started out in these kind of small rooms having conversations to where things are today, yeah, I think I'm excited about this year, the boom year, but also, the next 5 to 10 years, I think are going to be really interesting. Somebody told me that circularity is the next biggest buzzword. So yeah, kind of excited.
And I'll just suggest it's not just a buzzword.
Okay. Well, sorry, maybe not next buzz. I meant, you know what? That was my bad. Super trend.
Well, it's certainly something that we've been talking about for the last 2, 3, 4 years, and it's neat to see it become mainstream. But I would challenge us not just to talk about circular economy, but to talk about circular culture. So that impacts not only the economy, but everything that we do. And that resonates, of course, so well with our industry and the charities as well. Thank you, everybody, for your time today. This webinar will be available, as mentioned, on our website at NACTR.ca. If you're looking for more information, some of the reports, please feel free to reach out to our guest speakers here today or to us at info@NACTR.ca. Thank you, everybody. It's been really interesting, and I can't wait to do this next year in 2025 to see where we came. All right. Thank you, everybody. Good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.